hunger relief organization Feeding America, 1 in 10 New Yorkers, or 1.8 million, struggle with hunger, and nearly 600,000 of them are children.
Not much in here. Just the 2 apples. And that's because there are food shortages in New York.
The migrant crisis has put a serious strain on free resources like food pantries.
Tensions are growing with not enough food to go around.
They tell you to be there at 11 o'clock, but the line is from over there to over here.
Free food giveaways, especially during the holidays, have become a source of tension.
Outside, the line has grown longer.
It's on days like this, another long line at the Bowery Mission.
You feel like you're alone and feel like that no one cares for you.
So how can the largest city in the United States be experiencing food shortages and an inability to care for its residents? Well, a lot of New Yorkers are struggling right now, and a record 140,000 asylum seekers have come here from incredibly tough places, and that crisis is likely to cost the city $12 billion over the next 2 years. And for this reason, New York City is running out of everything, and every resource is in short supply. First, asylum seekers were able to stay in hotels, and now only disaster relief centers like Floyd Bennett Field are available. And on top of that, the mayor has asked every agency in New York to reduce its spending because the city has to save $6 billion each year for the next 2 years, which could result in less trash pickup and less police, less firefighters, and reduced school programs. And sadly, less food for the neediest of New Yorkers who are already struggling with astronomical rents and a sky-high cost of living.
Queensbridge housing resident Tammy Waters enjoys a Thanksgiving meal inside the Jacob Reed's neighborhood settlement Saturday. The meal is a treat and a precious commodity in the Long Island City community, where 6,000 NYCHA residents are competing for free hot meals.
That's a tough situation to hear about. NYCHA is the New York City Housing Authority, and they are the largest public housing provider in North America. They provide affordable and low-income apartments for 1 out of every 17 New Yorkers. They've got 177,000 apartments and over 2,400 buildings in New York. And as you can imagine, people in a low-income situation in New York, they're going to benefit from things like food banks and food pantries, a lot of which are funded by private companies and the city, but those are also facing cuts right now. And the problem is, with New York City's shelter population eclipsing 100,000 people, there just isn't as much to go around as there used to be.
Outside, the line has grown longer for locals like Laura Rivera, but they've shown patience and understanding for new neighbors in critical need.
It's helpful, but it's also a tragedy that has come to this.
So not only does the city help fund these food pantries and food banks, but now there are even more people using them than before. And look at this, the city has spent $35 million on food for people who need it. But since the mayor's ordered all city agencies to reduce their spending, there's going to be less to go around, which means the amounts of available food and the types of food being served are probably going to change, not for the better.
Right here, you have the largest population of public housing in a single unit of the whole country, where people are living 200% below the poverty line.
One organized the Thanksgiving meal giveaway. She says the bulk of her city council office's funding goes toward food insecurity remedies.
So that's the sad reality of New York City right now. There's just not enough for everybody who needs it. Asylum seekers are in a very tough situation, many of whom have fled extreme poverty in their home countries. And according to NYCHA, family residents are making on average $25,000 a year. And according to NYCHA, the average rent for an apartment in one of these buildings, $557 a month, but that's just 10% of what it costs to rent a market rate apartment. Those peaked at $5,600 over the last year. And even if your rent is incredibly affordable, what does it matter if you still can't afford any of the other things you need to live and exist in New York? Like, look, right across the street, we've got delis, bars, restaurants, all here on the Lower East Side. Breakfast sandwiches from a place like this, it's like $5. In fact, in New York, if you make $100,000 a year, it's gonna feel like $36,000 a year. And that's after you adjust for things like rent and all the other fees you have to live in New York. And sadly, residents in NYCHA are already $10K below that prior to any adjustments.
Shopping carts surge towards bags filled with fresh food at the New York Common Pantry. Staff struggling to satisfy the demand of families.
According to NYCHA, 42% of its residents are on a fixed income. And that might mean that the idea of moving out of NYCHA housing and into something that's market rate is a long way off, if not downright impossible. And if you're living in New York on $25,000 a year as a family, food pantries are probably something that you're used to. And as inflation has crept up and up and up, you've seen the resources at the pantries that you rely rely on start to dwindle. That's got to be incredibly concerning and frightening. And that's because basic things like groceries, milk, eggs, bread, those are more expensive now than they've ever been. But sadly, pantries aren't the only places running out of food. So this fridge across the street, it's not a discarded appliance. It's what's called a community fridge.
This refrigerator on 2nd Avenue in East Harlem, fortunately, is always open for hungry families in need. Ada Carry-On is one of those, along with local food pantries responsible for keeping it stocked up.
Now, there is a sign on here saying that this particular fridge needs to be replaced, which I don't doubt, but most community fridges ended up being donated when the appliance got removed from an apartment and was gonna be thrown away, but still worked. This fridge is getting its power from the boxing gym, and we're in a rather expensive part of Lower Manhattan right now. This particular fridge gives you all the information you need to donate to it. Looks like it's plant-based only. That's okay, it's free. Cash, purchases, raw ingredients, prepackaged food, and I think this one's trying to be vegan. But as far as I'm concerned, any donation's a good thing, and it might actually be easier to keep this thing clean if there are no meats or anything in it, like an old piece of chicken or something.
1 in 10 New Yorkers, or 1.8 million, struggle with hunger, and nearly 600,000 of them are children. And the fridges in few stand tall between families and hunger.
We're in the middle of a drought, food drought, where it's hard for people to get healthy food.
Now in 2020, community fridges like this guy started popping up all over the place. And oftentimes they were started by local groups, not city agencies. And the great thing about this, if you want to donate, just walk up, put something in, and it doesn't look like it ever comes inside. It looks like an outdoor fridge. And that makes donating pretty convenient because if you're just walking by, you got a bag of groceries, you're going to your fancy apartment, you can stick something in there. There's no barrier to doing it. Certain charities may have specific hours when they're able to receive donations. You might have to go to their location at a specific day and time. But sadly, community fridges are a dying breed. They're disappearing. And sadly, I guess that makes sense. If food is more expensive than it used to be, it's going to be harder for people to donate. Here's our fridge listed on the community fridge tracking website. There's quite a few of them that are listed on here. Now, we just checked our fridge and the 2 apples are gone, so it's completely empty, but people are still donating to it. However, the website was last checked about a month ago and it makes it look like it's always going to be empty. This other one looks a little bit better. It's in another neighborhood. Here's our next fridge, and it's also not looking too good. You'd think this one would be better off because it's next to a massive grocery store and like market and several restaurants. Now, I didn't know this, but apparently there's a whole bunch of problems associated with operating one of these. First and most obviously, it's got to be full of food or it's just wasting electricity. And you've got to manage the logistics of filling it with food in order to keep it stocked. And that brings us to the second problem, which is people. Apparently you need 10 to 12 people to keep one of these things in tip-top shape.
At the start of the pandemic, helping hands were a supply in surplus.
A lot of people had a lot of free time. A lot of the people we were working with, a lot of the organizers were maybe people who their jobs weren't happening.
But work started coming back and workers went along with it, leaving some fridges abandoned on city streets.
So it seems like as the city's economy has recovered and people have come back to the office, have gotten back in the workforce, they don't have as much time as they used to have to volunteer for things like community fridges. And since volunteers don't get paid, they've got to find time outside of work or a second job to continue helping. And some of the volunteer work is tough and thankless. Like you've got to remove old and spoiled food and clean it if you want it to last. Also, the whole time I've been here, the door has been open, and since there's food in there and there are rats in New York, something could go in there and eat the food. Maybe even a pigeon. Also, apparently it's very hard to find locations to put these things. This one happens to be at a grocery store / food market. And the main issue is power. You've got to have a safe power outlet that's going to survive in the rain outside where you can plug something in 24/7. And also, not every business that could host a community fridge is willing to do so. And it's possible that this isn't something every business wants. And to make matters even worse, the city recently announced it was going to cut over $2 billion of the funds that are used to help the asylum seekers, so the food shortages are going to get even worse.
Councilmember Julie Wan says she alerted the mayor to the growing tension in her community and was able to get $50,000 to increase the number of hot meals served inside NYC's. But she's concerned the mayor's new budget cuts will only put further stress on a community already living in scarcity.
$2.1 billion in cuts from asylum seeker services. There's no way that's going to have a positive impact on any of the problems the city's having right now. And according to CBS News, staying in a hotel might not be an option for those seeking asylum, which means it might just be the disaster relief centers used as housing. And I didn't know this. Apparently, in housing, they do their best to provide culturally appropriate meals, which may cost more money. This article speculates bag lunches might be the new normal instead of hot prepared meals. And the city's budget director says that he had hoped the state of New York would pick up a third of the cost of maintaining and running the shelters, but as of right now, the organization that helps the folks, which is funded by the city, has been tasked with coming up with specific ways to make continued cuts. But there are some bright spots in this crisis.
It is also here where every year a warm smile and thousands of meals are served to those hoping to start a new chapter after years of struggle.
Without Bowery, being homeless, you probably won't even make it, to be honest. But I'm very grateful for Bowery Mission.
So that right there is the Bowery Mission. It's the longest running nonprofit serving the homeless in New York. See, it says it right on the wall, 1879. And now it's a full service, privately run charity here in the Lower East Side. And although it started out as just a soup kitchen, now they do meals, they have church services, and they even have beds, which could give somebody who has nowhere else to go a place to stay. And they also offer to help their guests with individual access plans to get out of the shelter system altogether.
Raphael is now the Bowery Mission's executive chef.
God had a plan for me, so I know what it feels like to feel like you're alone and feel like that no one cares for you. So when you give someone just a hot plate of food, to show them that, there's people out there that love them, it what keeps us going here.
And it's great to see that New Yorkers can still come together and help the communities that are in need, even when times are tough. But what do you think the city can do to better help those who are in need? Let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.